So, Chris, Airbnb, for the third time in 8 years, is really shouting and screaming about experiences again. And we've got to credit Airbnb. They're probably the person or the business that came up with the word experiences. And now everybody's using it to the extent, when I came into Glasgow today on the train and I booked my ticket and I looked at my digital ticket and underneath it, it said experiences. When I clicked it, obviously it didn't go to Airbnb, who came up with the name, it went to Get Your Guide. But this word experiences, I think we have to credit Airbnb with. They're saying it's a massive market, silly numbers of trillions. They're going back in hard. We have to say the previous two attempts were probably failures. Worked for some operators.
It's the only one that could be,
Worked for some operators. Obviously didn't work for Airbnb because they pulled the plug twice on it and scaled back on it. Did work for some operators, didn't work for other operators. So this new attempt of Airbnb re-entering experiences, what do you think?
If I'm being brutally honest, I think it's set up for another failure. I just can't see what they're doing drastically different. Well, we've all said this a few times already, but unless they connect with some other partner or have a proper API where people can actually upload their tours and information and have the availability across all the different platforms that they have, I just can't see how they can scale this. It just doesn't work for me. You can have some niche experiences that someone can maybe make a sort of lifestyle business out of, but the icons thing, the thing that they're obviously bringing back, we just noticed it the other day when we went back onto Airbnb, experiences suddenly just appeared again out of nowhere. But to me, it's coming across as not much different from what they've had before, and it's almost like they're trying to beat the same brush or use the same pig but with different lipstick, if I'm going to use an analogy like that.
So when the CEO announced it, he was pushing again Curated. Now, I'm a bit of a believer in Curated, so I'm on side with
curation's the right thing.
Curated content, particularly in OTAs, because otherwise they just drown in same product that I believe confuses the customer rather than necessarily helps the customer. So I'm a big believer in curation, but it does, on the back of curation, he then said something that I found a bit insane, whereas he wants cheaper curation and cheaper product and cheaper experiences on there.
I most of the experiences I looked at already in Airbnb before were far too cheap. I remember being in Lisbon. We ended up not going with the tour because it was just going to be us and no one else was on the tour. I couldn't do that to the girl who was going to take us out for a 4-hour food tour, and for the whole family it was €60. And I'm going, that's far too cheap, and I just can't allow you to go out on your own for €60 just to take all us out on our own for that amount of money for 4 hours. That is far too cheap in its own. So he's looking for them to be even more cheaper than that. It just doesn't compute. If anything, tour prices should be going up. If he's trying to create this thing called icons, to me, icons sounds exclusive. It sounds like something a little bit more upmarket because it's meant to be icons sounds something special. If all you're going to do is offer cheap tours, that's not an icon in my book. To me, the brand disconnect is all over the place.
No, there is a disconnect. Obviously, the icons are not where they're expecting to get scale from. The icons are a PR stunt to get lots of attraction, lots of eyeballs. Yes, they're going to sell some of the icons at a reasonably high price, but it's not a scalable thing. But it works from we're going to be a curated with special experiences here. Here's some of the special ones that are obviously at a high price point, but we're going to have this massive marketplace of curated experiences and cheaper product. The disconnect I see from cheaper is, one, tour operators' costs over the last several years have rocketed. Inflation has rocketed the cost of providing the tour. I read the terms and conditions of experiences today versus previously, and it's still in there. A tour operator has to lead an Airbnb customer without adding other customers from other channels. I actually don't know any tour operators who have adhered to that over the years, but that's still in there.
It's not viable.
So they're asking for tour operators to be exclusive on curation of product and experiences just for Airbnb, and then do it cheaper.
Yeah.
So there's three things there that disconnect with a tour operator from the way I look at it. All of that could be aligned looking in the positive, I believe all of these things could be aligned, not the cheaper necessarily, but the curation could be aligned, absolutely, with the tour operators. The volume could be aligned, because in a curated marketplace, Airbnb as a company could take decisions about where they want to drive volume and where they want to drive eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
So you could end up with hosts and operators running Airbnb-only tours if that volume is driven.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a large global marketplace and the long tails in there, which tend to be the most unique and curated experiences that they say they want, you cannot insist on, if you've only got one customer or two customers, you have to take them, because basically the tour operator's losing money on them.
Exactly. No, it's just most Airbnbs tend to be a couple of people, or maybe a small family. But it's very rare to have an Airbnb where you maybe got 10 people or 15 people sleeping in a room. It does happen, but there's not that many places for that. So that operator's got to deliver that experience cheaper for basically probably 2 people, maybe 3 or 4 people at the most. But they want it just to me, it's a slippery slope the opposite way from where things are meant to be. And the other thing, and I know we mentioned it in the chat we had with Mitch as well in one of the other videos that we did, Airbnb for don't get me wrong, and I'll say up front, and I know we all think the same, I think Airbnb's got one of the best brands in the industry. I love the brand. I use it all the time for accommodations with the family and everything. My wife likes a hot tub. No issues. Anywhere with a hot tub, we're pretty much going there. But they do a terrible job at promoting experiences. Once someone's booked that accommodation, it's not right in your face to say you can do all these things. There's nothing in the actual accommodations themselves to say you can do Airbnb experiences. It tends to be other experiences that the owner of the bloody place does themselves or offers people that they know, partners that they have. There's nothing with Airbnb that's been branded or promoting their tours and experiences on there. They need to do a better job in that sense, in the properties as well as on their app. Until they sort that out, I think, like I say, I think this is just going to be another failure. But if they can't get the basics right, how do they expect this to take off? I just don't understand.
So in my logical old days engineering brain, I look at the logistics of everything first, because logistics and tour operating matters. Now Airbnb know factually when every one of their apartments, houses are, so they have a geography of every apartment.
Mm-hmm.
In real time, they actually know how many customers are in each apartment. So if we're standing in Glasgow today, on any region of Glasgow, they can, in real time, put a footprint down saying, I've got 200 Airbnbs there, and in this given moment, I have 480 people staying in these, and the correct number of people per apartment. And if it's a big one, I use Airbnb when I go away with friends, when we're away for a weekend out, and there often is 8 or 9 of us. Mm-hmm. So straight away, that's aligned with a group tour.
Yeah.
If I got the right product put in front of me. Other times when you're with the family, etc., that's different. Mm-hmm. But Airbnb have that knowledge in real time, live.
Mm-hmm. And they don't use it.
Therefore, to me, it's not beyond the wit of man to match the experiences to regionalised radiuses of distance to who's in the apartments and in the destinations at that time. Because it's exceedingly different. I'm looking over here at the Hydro just up there, which does a lot of music events. When the Airbnbs around it will be full, therefore you should be putting experiences in front of people that align with the fact that you know people are in there going to music events, therefore experiences that are more aligned with that, or everybody needs to eat, maybe food experiences around the area. But this lining up of experiences to the right geography of the apartments with the right customers in there seems to me not a complex, difficult step to make. And that may solve some of the challenges of the product the Airbnb company wanting the product to be cheaper, because operators, if they knew that level of targeting was happening, that level of customer acquisition was much better than random customer acquisition, they may be able to do a better job at curating specific product for Airbnb and make a cheaper price work.
Yeah, that's not just about the destination you're in. No, anyone who books an Airbnb is probably booked multiple times in multiple destinations for multiple reasons. They have all the data on that, so they can maybe see a pattern or a trend or whatever it is, the type of stuff that, like I say, we tend to book stuff up with hot tubs, or we book up stuff with kids because we book 2 kids. So it's serving those experiences to us because they always know we're going to be travelling with our kids or travelling with us and travelling with that. They've got all that data there. They just don't seem to use it effectively enough to then promote the experiences they're trying to sell. And again, trying to sell at a cheaper rate it just doesn't work for me.
It's not a slight disconnect. I've seen this disconnect since 2016 when they started, and I'm on video saying it wouldn't work then. Relying on what they call as hosts versus tour operators, and I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but I think they've proved that relying on hosts who are not professional tour operators, hosts are people who are renting a room out or renting a building out or renting an apartment out, which is very different from operating an experience. And the simple reason being is a host is an individual, therefore they have another life outside Airbnb. They just happen to have an asset. They're renting on Airbnb, they've got a job probably, may have kids, they've got a life going on. And when you're non-professional, because you've got your professions elsewhere, you may think, I'm going to do this hosting business and I'm a fantastic Italian cook, so I'm going to get people to come round, I'm going to cook Italian. But then my kid gets sick. They're going to get cancelled because the kid's going to come first. Whereas if that's a professional tour operator, the fact that the kid's sick doesn't matter. It sounds terrible for the kid, but it doesn't. The tour operator's built a business, therefore they have other people to provide the experience, and the cancellation doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Whereas any OTA knows the cancellation rate is incredibly important to them, and you don't want to have a high cancellation rate, whereas you do get that with a host type environment. You won't get it on the apartments as much, but you'll get it on a dynamic experience that has many moving parts, and the host has many moving parts in their life. So that leans back to then professional operators, which are tour operators, people who do this for a living. You're not going to get the cancellation rate. But if you want to work with tour operators, comes back to you mentioned earlier, the tour operators don't have the time to be taking bookings from all different platforms unless it's happening in a streamlined, automatic way, which means APIs into booking systems these days. And the days of doing stuff on spreadsheets is over. A lot of good operators, the best operators, have distribution strategies. They have many partners. They would love to have Airbnb as a great partner. They want to have Airbnb, but they physically won't work with Airbnb unless they get an API connection.
To me, everything you've just said there, it just made me think that Airbnb are not putting the person who, that one person who can only deliver that experience, putting them first. If they want them to deliver a cheaper experience, they're not allowed. That means that they're going to earn less money, because obviously Airbnb will take their cut and all the other things, other costs that come with it, especially if you're running food tours and things like that, can be even more costly. They're not going to be able to grow a sustainable, reliable business, because generally they're just not going to have enough income coming in, because Airbnb are demanding that they make it as cheap as possible. If anything, they should be thinking, okay, how can we make this work for the operator or the guide, the loan guide? How can we make that work for them so they can become, or they can provide that experience more often, so they can do less of their other job or whatever it is that they're doing, and actually make this a viable job, even if it is just a lifestyle business, something that they can live on. If you're asking them to do it as cheaply as possible, they're not able to deliver that in volume because they can only do it on their own. To me, it just doesn't work out. Well, if you want longevity on the platform and you want longevity from guys offering really unique, great experiences, the only way you can do that is by investing in them. And if you're asking them to do it dirt cheap, that's not investing in them. Yeah, you're thinking about your customer, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have many experiences if all your guides that are delivering those experiences are suddenly coming off the platform, because it's just unsustainable. And so there needs to be a balancing act in terms of paying them and allowing them to charge the right amount versus actually helping the customer as well.
One of the reasons I'm quite passionate about this is I actually believe Airbnb is sitting on the biggest opportunity in this space, in the experience. Simple reason, that brand they have is the only brand that your average consumer who's not a travel industry geek still knows that word Airbnb. If you ask the average consumer, do they know any of the other OTAs in the experiences sector, it is a rare consumer that does.
We all know, if we're all saying that, but we don't say, oh, we're going to look for an apartment, we're going to look for a place to rent. We always say we're going to Airbnb it, or we're going to do that. It's became synonymous.
So it is a super strong brand that brings people in. And even if you don't book it often, I often book hotels or Airbnbs, but I often check the Airbnb and book the hotel, or vice versa. But the Airbnb will suck me in because it's a brand and it's on my phone and all the rest of it. And I know that I'm aligned with a brand doing it. Again, having that brand and having that opportunity and just not aligning these opportunities up. So I was one of the first properties in Europe on Airbnb. way back in 2009, 2010. I had a big mountain lodge. Now, we ran it for retreats, where we'd bring people in, 1 week retreat, 10-day retreat, 2-week retreat, where we'd do a lot of adventure stuff. But a big property, an asset, can be run for all sorts of retreats. I used to hire that out to some ladies who ran it for a yoga retreat. Now, Airbnb have all of these places, because they used to have mine way back in that day. I used to do it on the weeks I wasn't using it, I would rent it just as a property for families, etc., etc. But they have all of these properties that are absolutely perfect for retreats. Now, 99% of people who run retreats, these creative people, do not own their own property. It's a small amount that have the property, like I had, plus running the retreats. Most of them do not have their own property, so they're looking for lots of properties. Now, at the moment, I know lots of them book properties on Airbnb, so Airbnbs can say, well, we're getting the property sold, but they're 100% not getting the retreat sold, the actual activity, what was doing there, whereas that identification of these two customer groups, retreat owners and large properties in stunning locations, because everybody who's running a retreat wants a great property in a stunning location, Airbnb could be a funnel, top of funnel content marketer for these retreats. And retreats, by definition, tend to be quite unique, very curated, so ticks all the boxes for Airbnb. They get the property sold, they get customers coming in to the experiences sold there as well. The one bit it doesn't tick is retreats are not cheap. Retreats are a curated, higher price product. Now, I'm not saying that is a massive channel across it, but it's a significant channel that's using the assets that they already have. They just haven't bolted them together.
Yeah. No. I think you should be working for Airbnb, because I think when you just said you'd be making it work. Do you think this is going to work for them this time round? Do you think experience is the way they're doing it?
There's a thing in often, and I don't know if this is going to be true, but often on many things it doesn't work the first time, second time, but the third time it does. Like, that's not picking on Airbnb. It often takes 2 or 3 iterations of having a goal to make things work, and you have to adapt and change to make things work. So it doesn't bother me that people get stuff wrong, because I've spent my whole life getting stuff wrong, and I take several attempts, and then I eventually get something that right. So I don't see this as surprising. What I see surprising is what they've said so far, and obviously we don't know what they haven't said and what they're doing, but what they've said so far seems to be a rehash of what didn't work previously, just with a cheaper price.
Like I say, it's a pig with different
lipsticks. So, yeah, pig with different lipsticks. So unless what they've said publicly is nonsense and they've actually got a much better plan, I don't think it'll work. But I have to qualify that with their resources, their brand, their funding, their talent. They can attract all of that at a scale very few travel companies can. You have no excuse to keep getting this wrong. Everybody will take wrong for 2, 3, 4 times. But you have no excuse with all these resources and all that talent and all that access to capital and the assets and the reach. All the places are there. This is a case, all the bits are there. This is a case of bolting together. So what they're saying, I think they'll get it wrong if they follow that route. And I don't think they have any excuse to get it wrong, because they have all the bits. It's just putting them together in the right way.
Yeah. For me, as I said, I think unless they have the API connectivity and they get the basics right, but actually promoting it properly in the properties that they have, it's going to fail. They just there's no way for it to scale and compete against your Booking.coms and Expedias and Viators and all these other places. I get they're not going to go to have those numbers that the Viators have, the 6,000 room tours that has. I know they're not going to go down that route, thankfully. And it's going to be more curated. But they still need to scale to a certain extent. And the only way of really doing that properly is by having the API connection. Without that, it's going to fail.
I'm a big fan of the curation. I really think they're onto something with curating, not just geography of where people are and a limited amount of experiences there, but really if they want the real curated experience that is an Airbnb experience that cannot be put on another platform, I do believe that's possible. Like, I could design 15 of them in 2 days that could be on Airbnb, using Airbnb assets of the properties there plus the individuals, bringing all that together, and it's not suitable for another platform. So that is doable if the volume justifies it.
Well, you have to focus more on like content creators and things like that rather than operators, and especially it's not going to really be a platform for operators. Then it's going to be a platform for content creators and, like I say, those lifestyle guys.
I think it's a platform that cuts across hosts, as they call them, content creators, if the content creators actually want to engage with human beings rather than just content. Specialists from all other things. You've got to mind that bracket experiences. It wasn't just it was made up, but it covers such a wide range. And it's not just tour operating is only one vertical within that experiences. We're surrounded by sporting events around here. Sport, and it's a massive. So someone who's a raving fanatic sports player or an ex-professional sports player could easily create a bunch of experiences in Airbnb that's nothing to do with
A renowned chef,
tour operators. So I do think this widening of the word experiences to take in every man and his dog to get it to say it's a trillion. I know why they're doing it, and I do think it opens a market, but they still have all of those problems with those non-professional users. Whereas I think there could be a tiered level of supply going into Airbnb, where you have hosts, X number, professionals from other verticals, X number, tour operators, X number. How you structure that, some work would need to be done. There's one area that definitely needs an API, that's tour operators. Otherwise, tour operators just get fed up with it if they can't actually get the connections and the bookings flowing easy. Often I think Airbnb is forgetting that when they want these unique tours and these small hosts / tour operators hosting them, if they're out hosting them and their technology's not working and all connected, well then your customers are not getting answered because they're out working and they haven't got people sitting in the office to answer them. Therefore, give them the system where the customers can just book in it all, the booking automation flows. So again, I'm coming back to it's such a huge, massive opportunity that I think they could go from where they are in the OTA space, and they say they're not an OTA, but in reality they are an OTA, which is a small percentage of the market as an OTA. I think they could leap to number one if they could get all of these bits bolted together. But as it stands today, I just don't, and I feel sad about it because I want them to make this work because it's going to help who we spend all our time trying to help. It's going to help the tour operators if we have this global best-known brand name really, really working well in experiences. So it's in all of our interest in the industry to get this to work. But at the moment, none of us seem very positive about it.
No, and as you said, no, they could easily become number one, obviously, because they're like Booking.com. They're serving both the accommodation, they know where they are, and then they can deliver the experiences. A lot of the other OTAs, your 5 hours, TripAdvisor and stuff like that, are missing that accommodation part of it. So they can really dominate this market if they get it right. I just, again, think what they're doing just now just isn't the right place. To me, it's just similar to what they've done in the past. And until they get all the basics right, it's not going to work.
So if you're listening to this and you're a tour operator out there or any creator out there, just leave us a message, see what you think. How's Airbnb going to go? Is it going to help you? Are you going to relist if you've been delisted? Are you going to try and get more product on there, or are you just going to back away from it?
Interesting questions.